Hello! This presentation is all about grit. You've probably heard the word grit before, but may not know what the concept of grit means for you personally. The goal of this presentation is to allow you to have a better understanding of what grit is and the role it plays in your life. To begin, you're going to get your grit score. Please pause the video for a moment, and using the link on this slide, take a few minutes to complete the assessment. Remember, there are no right answers, and the assessments are anonymous. Now that you've had a chance to take the assessment, do you have any guesses as to what grit is all about? Grit is a theory developed by Angela Lee Duckworth, a psychologist working through the University of Pennsylvania. And who better to explain grit than the developer herself? Here's a short clip from her TED Talk.
When I was 27 years old, I left a very demanding job in management consulting for a job that was even more demanding, teaching. I went to teach 7th graders math in the New York City public schools. And like any teacher, I made quizzes and tests, I gave out homework assignments. When the work came back, I calculated grades. What struck me was that IQ was not the only difference between my best and my worst students. Some of my strongest performers did not have stratospheric IQ scores. Some of my smartest kids weren't doing so well. And that got me thinking. The kinds of things you need to learn in 7th grade math, sure, they're hard. Ratios, decimals, the area of a parallelogram. But these concepts are not impossible. And I was firmly convinced that every one of my students could learn the material if they worked hard and long enough. After several more years of teaching, I came to the conclusion that what we need in education is a much better understanding of students and learning from a motivational perspective, from a psychological perspective. In education, the one thing we know how to measure best is IQ. But what if doing well in school and in life depends on much more than your ability to learn quickly and easily? So I left the classroom and I went to graduate school to become a psychologist. I started studying kids and adults in all kinds of super challenging settings. And in every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies, asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure, things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school. So it's not just at West Point or the National Spelling Bee that grit matters, it's also in school, especially for kids at risk for dropping out. To me, the most shocking thing about grit is how little we know, how little science knows about building it. Every day, parents and teachers ask me, how do I build grit in kids? What do I do to teach kids a solid work ethic? How do I keep them motivated for the long run? The honest answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that talent doesn't make you gritty. Our data show very clearly that there are many talented individuals who simply do not follow through on their commitments. In fact, in our data, grit is usually unrelated or even inversely related to measures of talent. So far, the best idea I've heard about building grit in kids is something called growth mindset. This is an idea developed at Stanford University by Carol Dweck, and it is the belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, that it can change with your effort. Dr. Dweck has shown that when kids read and learn about the brain and how it changes and grows in response to challenge, they're much more likely to persevere when they fail because they don't believe that failure is a permanent condition. So growth mindset is a great idea for building grit, but we need more. And that's where I'm going to end my remarks, because that's where we are. That's the work that stands before us. We need to take our best ideas, our strongest intuitions, and we need to test them. We need to measure whether we've been successful, and we have to be willing to fail, to be wrong, to start over again with lessons learned. In other words, we need to be gritty about getting our kids grittier. Thank you.
So let's break this down a bit. Grit is the passion and perseverance to accomplish a long-term goal. Grit is the driving force and motivation that's required to see things through to the end, to push through obstacles and then come out of those obstacles with more drive to cross the finish line. There's a quote here from the movie A League of Their Own. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, anyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great. Does this ring true for you in your life? Isn't it true that often the most satisfying achievements are the ones we work the hardest for? Grit is about long-term stamina rather than short-term intensity. Some of you may recognize this little guy. This is Remy. Remy is a rat who loves to cook and pursues his passion at all costs in the movie Ratatouille. Remy is a character that's full of grit. Can you think of any other characters that are full of grit? I want to direct your thinking back to something Angela Duckworth mentioned in her talk. There are many talented individuals that simply do not follow through on their commitments. Grit is usually unrelated or even inversely related to measures of talent. Thinking about that point, let's move into growth mindset, developed by Carol Dweck, a psychologist at Stanford University. Here we are going to be comparing fixed mindset versus growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, people believe their basic qualities, like their intelligence or talent, are simply fixed traits. They spend their time documenting their intelligence or talent instead of developing them. They believe that talent alone creates success without effort, and they're wrong. Growth mindset is when people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. Virtually all great people have had these qualities. Now, I've been told that there's an art professor on campus whose motto is, anyone can draw. I don't know about you, but artistic abilities such as drawing doesn't really seem like a skill that all people could tackle. But here's a perfect example of growth mindset. Can you guess what celebrity this artist was trying to draw? If you guessed Carrie Underwood, you would be right. Now let's fast forward 6 years. This artist's musical taste may have changed slightly from Carrie Underwood to Taylor Swift, but what also changed were their drawing skills. This is the same artist with clearly different levels of artistic skill. This is growth mindset. I'll be sharing 4 components of grit, with the first one being impulse control or delayed gratification. Have you ever seen the marshmallow experiment, maybe in psych class? If you haven't, you should look it up. Children are given one marshmallow and told that they can either eat it now and be done, or wait until the experimenter returns, and if they still have their full marshmallow, they'll get a second one. Watching the internal struggle of the kids sniffing and poking at their marshmallows is hilarious. But studies show that children and students who are able to delay gratification actually do better in school. Makes sense, right? The second component of grit is learning how to fail, and this is a hard one for many of us. However, learning how to successfully fail is crucial because it's going to happen. But taking the time to grow and learn from failed experiences can teach us how not to do something, which is just as valuable. Like they say in Meet the Robinsons, keep moving forward. The third component of grit is understanding that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you're working hard towards a goal in life, you are going to get tired eventually. When we find those times in life when we're feeling tired, there are ways we can help ourselves get a little more energy and keep going. We could do things like pray, take a walk, stretch, nap, or even listen to music we enjoy. Those are reactive to our situation, but we can be proactive in taking steps to enact self care in our lives, and that can help prevent burnout in the long run. Those could be activities like baking cookies or creating something, spending time with friends and family, taking time to laugh, and working to create a regular schedule for ourselves. These are self care tools that can help you continue on the marathon. The fourth and final component of grit is focus. This encompasses what will be your driving force. It's your motivation. This can include your passions, your goals, and even your life calling. Take time to think about what these look like in your life, and that can help you create a framework for what it means to be gritty. So, how do you develop grit? Here are a few ideas. Don't underestimate the power of positive thinking. If you believe you can do it, then you can. We also encourage you to acknowledge your strengths and build on them, while also accepting your weaknesses, but don't overfocus on them. It's also important not to overestimate the power of hard work. Hard work is an essential component for developing grit. And sometimes you fake it until you make it. Sometimes you have to jump right into a situation, and it's in the jumping in that you will find success. Other times, you have to understand your limits. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to ask questions. Most importantly, it's important to be authentic if you want to develop grit. The most important thing you can do is just be you. So let's think about how you can practically apply grit in your own life. Consider the following questions. What component of grit do you do well? And where could you improve? What are some ways you can improve your overall college grit score? We encourage you to develop a short-term goal that can help raise your grit score. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. We hope you've learned a little bit more about what grit is and how it shows up in your life. We hope you can think of creative ways for how you may be able to continue to develop your grit and see your goals through to the end.